Okay, let's dive right into this. Did you know that right now, literally at this exact second, without you even noticing it, your body is operating like a highly engineered, climate-controlled machine? It's true. In fact, your body burns a massive chunk of its daily calories just keeping your internal temperature at exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Your brain and your skin are constantly talking to each other, acting like this incredibly high-tech thermostat, making thousands of tiny micro-adjustments just to keep you alive and functioning. It's an absolute marvel of biological engineering. And today, we're going to open the hood and look exactly at the mechanics of how it all works.
Welcome to this explainer on thermoregulation and the negative feedback system. If you're prepping for exams, especially around topics like homeostasis and excretion, mastering this specific system is an absolute must. So we are going to completely demystify biological self-regulation today, turning all these invisible internal physiological processes into clear mechanical blueprints.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll meet your internal thermostat, map out the negative feedback loop, zoom in on the skin's microanatomy, and then run two extreme weather simulations, the hot day and the cold day, before wrapping it all up with some common exam pitfalls. Let's jump in.
Starting with part 1, meeting your internal thermostat. We really need to establish the baseline rules of internal stability first before we get into the nitty-gritty heating and cooling mechanisms.
Right at the center of everything we're discussing today is this one crucial concept, homeostasis. As you can see defined here, it's the process by which living organisms maintain a highly stable internal environment. Basically, your body is constantly adjusting conditions, like your temperature, your pH levels, things like that. Why? Well, because this stability is completely non-negotiable for your cells. If your internal environment swings too wildly in one direction or the other, the microscopic machinery of your cells literally breaks down. Now, what's really fascinating here is the structure magnified right in the center of the brain. That little guy is the hypothalamus. You can think of it as your body's central processing unit or your ultimate thermostat. It's wide awake 24/7, constantly monitoring the data streaming in from your nervous system and issuing rapid-fire commands to keep that core temperature totally stable.
To maintain that perfect stability, the hypothalamus actually has to manage opposing flows of energy. Notice the inward-pointing arrows representing heat gained. This heat comes from your own internal metabolism, plus whatever heat you're absorbing from your environment. But counteracting that, we have those outward-pointing arrows representing heat lost. Your body dumps heat through radiation, conduction, convection, and, crucially, evaporation. So homeostasis is really just the active, constant balancing of these two opposing forces.
So how exactly does the brain manage to balance those forces perfectly? Let's move to section 2 and examine the core machinery of this explainer, the negative feedback loop.
We can essentially treat this like an engineered flowchart. Step 1, a stimulus occurs, say a sudden massive spike in temperature. That triggers step 2, receptors detect those changes and immediately send a warning signal. Finally, step 3, effectors receive that signal and take physical, mechanical action to bring the factor right back to normal. The system works specifically to negate that initial stimulus, which is exactly why we call it a negative feedback loop. Let's use a familiar mental model to really lock this in, the cruise control analogy. Imagine a car speedometer with the needle locked perfectly at 65 miles per hour. If the car starts going up a steep hill, that's your stimulus, it naturally slows down. The car's sensors detect this drop in speed, and the engine, the effector, automatically gives it more gas to bring the speed right back up to 65. The negative feedback loop in your body does the exact same thing. It constantly adjusts your internal mechanisms to keep your biological speedometer locked in place.
Okay, now that we understand the software running the show, let's shift our focus to the physical hardware executing these commands. We are going to the surface level for section 3, the microanatomy of the skin.
Taking a look at this cross-section, you can see the underlying structural components of mammalian skin, which plays a massive role in thermoregulation. It's basically split into two main layers. On top, explicitly labeled there, is the epidermis. That's your tough outer protective barrier. But beneath that, you see the much thicker layer? That's the dermis. The dermis is where the magic happens. It houses all the active mechanical components, the wiring, and the biological plumbing.
Deeply embedded within that dermal layer are highly specialized sensors called thermoreceptors. And the absolute crucial point to remember here is their strict isolation of duty. They have one job:
Thermoreceptors strictly detect changes in temperature. They do not care about texture, they don't care about a high five or physical pressure. They are purely thermal data collectors, instantly feeding temperature information straight back up to the hypothalamus.
All right, we've got our baseline rules, our flowchart, and our hardware. Let's run our first dynamic simulation and really stress test this machinery against the elements. Section 4. The hot day.
Imagine stepping out into a glaring, hot, sunny summer day. That blazing heat is our trigger, step 1 of the feedback loop. As your internal thermometer spikes up into the red zone, the hypothalamus immediately detects a dangerous increase in your core body temperature. It doesn't wait around. It instantly fires off emergency signals down to the effectors in your skin.
The very first major effector response to kick in is vasodilation. Notice those red arrows physically expanding outward? The blood vessels in your skin are actively widening. By increasing the diameter of that internal plumbing, a massive volume of warm blood rushes right up to the surface of the skin. Why do that? Because bringing all that internal heat directly to the surface allows it to aggressively radiate away into the cooler air around you.
Simultaneously, a second powerful mechanism kicks into gear. If we focus on a single sweat gland down in the dermis, we see it pumping liquid up to the surface. And get this, on a really hot day, your body can produce up to a couple of liters of sweat an hour. But here's the trick. The liquid itself isn't what cools you down. It's the mechanical phase change. The heat from your widely dilated blood vessels transfers directly into the sweat, causing it to turn from a liquid into a vapor. As it evaporates, it literally pulls that heat away from your skin's surface. That is evaporative cooling in action.
So that's how we keep from overheating. But what happens when we flip the script? Let's move to our second simulation, Section 5, and see how this identical system builds a completely opposite response for the cold day. Imagine you're standing in freezing, pouring rain. This time, our internal thermometer plummets down into the blue. A brand new trigger registers. The hypothalamus detects a dangerous drop in core body temperature. To keep you alive, it has to send out a totally different set of survival commands to stop any more heat from escaping. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast with our hot day scenario. Look at those blue arrows contracting inward. This is vasoconstriction. Your blood vessels are physically narrowing down. By basically choking off the blood flow to the surface of the skin, your body is acting like a fortress. It pulls all that warm blood deep, deep into your core to protect your vital organs and aggressively conserve internal heat.
But sometimes just trapping the heat you have isn't quite enough. Sometimes we actually have to generate more. So the hypothalamus triggers additional heating mechanisms. First up, muscle shivering. These are rapid, involuntary mechanical contractions of your muscles that literally generate internal heat as a byproduct. Second, your hair erector muscles physically contract, forcing your little arm hairs to stand straight up. This is actually what causes goosebumps. It's a biological leftover from thousands of years ago when humans were covered in a lot more fur. Making the hair stand up traps a microscopic boundary layer of still air right against your skin, which acts exactly like a puffy jacket of thermal insulation. Let's absolutely lock this in by comparing these two actions side by side. Mentally photograph this. On the left, we have the hot day, with those outward-pointing red vectors showing vasodilation. Vessels are widening, heat is being released. Over on the right, the cold day, with inward-pointing blue vectors showing vasoconstriction. Vessels are narrowing, heat is being conserved. Memorizing the direction of the forces on this exact setup is the most efficient way to guarantee you understand how the whole system behaves.
Which brings us to our final section, exam pitfalls and recap. Let's synthesize all this incredible data into some actionable advice so you can easily sidestep the trick questions you'll definitely see on a test.
Let's walk through this matrix methodically, because these are the most common stumbling blocks. First up, students constantly confuse the receptors. Remember, thermoreceptors do not detect texture or pressure. In fact, they only detect temperature changes. Second, the heavy hitters, vasodilation versus vasoconstriction. The most common error is flipping these two around. But look at the words. Vasodilation literally has the word dilate in it, like when your pupils dilate. It widens the plumbing to dump heat. Vasoconstriction has the word constrict in it, like a boa constrictor. It narrows the plumbing to save heat. Use this chart to keep those strict definitions separated in your mind.
We visualize the entire thermostat today, going all the way from the hypothalamus down to the microscopic sweat glands. So I want to leave you with this final provocative challenge. Knowing how this beautiful biological machinery works, right now,
without looking back at your notes, can you correctly map out the entire step-by-step flowchart of the negative feedback loop for both extreme heat and extreme cold? Try to practice visualizing those specific triggers, the receptors, and the exact physical effector responses. Keep revisiting these mechanical concepts, and I promise you will absolutely master this system. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.